I want to introduce our next speaker, and he's a friend I've known for quite a few years. Brian Bledsoe is I told you this morning he was a great meteorologist, weatherman, and about three-fourths comedian. And that he is. I think you'll enjoy it. He's chief meteorologist for a television station in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Also has a consulting business. And the neat part is he has a heart for helping us in agriculture. You know, because the weather is one of the things we cannot change. But we can change our risk management strategies based on information we know and that he can help us in forecasting. And so Brian's a great consultant. He helps. He's got a newsletter. I'm going to turn it over to him as I use a lot of his stuff in making my insurance buying decisions for pasture, range, and forage. And with that, where did he go? There's the man right there, Brian Bledsoe. Please welcome our friend Brian.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, sir. Oh, I do have one more thing.
Go ahead.
I turn it over. One announcement I need to make. You have gotten a survey on your table. If you haven't filled that out yet, it's not for the whole thing. It's for what you've seen so far. Please go ahead and fill that out. Pass it to the front, all the way to the front of your tables. We'll come along and pick those up as soon as your talk is done. Brian, thank you.
Thanks, Donald. Well, good afternoon, folks. You don't get many bigger endorsements than you do from that man right there. I met Donald probably 10, 12 years ago down at Texas A&M, where I do the beef cattle short course every year. And I do a lot of different things for Texas Agrilife, as well as individual clients of mine, scattered not only around the western high plains, but the southern plains. And I'll tell you what, anytime you can come to an organization and a town as a weather guy, and it rains the day you show up, my day's probably not going to get any better, okay? I would love to stay down here another day with you guys, but I've got weather issues of my own back in Colorado, because while you're getting rain down here, we're going to get a bunch of snow. Yeah, because it's only 2 seasons in Colorado. It's either winter or summer, and we're still in winter here. So the goal that I want, and some of you have seen me speak before, heard me speak, my goal every audience is to show somebody something new that maybe they haven't seen as far as weather or climatology or whatever. And I'm very self-aware in knowing that the majority of you folks don't think we know what's going to happen 3 minutes from now, let alone 3 hours from now, or 3 days, or 3 months, or what have you. But the problem with meteorology when it comes to agriculture is the message has gotten completely screwed up, okay? With the advent of technology, you can look at that forecast anytime you want on your phone. It's going to tell you how it's going to rain. It's going to tell you when it's going to rain. It's going to tell the temperature. It's going to tell the wind, all that stuff. You know what? Don't buy it. It's too precise. And from a weather standpoint, meteorology and the business of that, we've hemmed ourselves into this corner. I was on the phone all morning. I work with a bunch of farmers up in southwest Kansas, and they are sweating bullets today because they have the chance at seeing possibly the biggest rain that they've seen in over a year and a half up there. I get it. I remember what it was like growing up on the ranch and the farm. I remember Dad's mood changing very sharply depending on how that rain fell or didn't fall. Okay? So I get it. And I'm telling them, like, look, the messaging here is weather's going to do whatever it's going to do. My job is to give you the best case scenario with the evidence that I have so you have a better understanding of how to manage your risk. Does that message make sense? Instead of saying, you're going to get 2 inches of rain at your house today. Who knows that? That's just dumb, in my opinion, to try to do something like that because it's not feasible. Now, I can see you're going to get 1 to 2 inches of rain at your house. Would you be happy with an inch of rain at your house today? I know a lot of people will be happy with an inch of rain at their house today, okay? And I can always say, but you know what? There's also a possibility you could get more or less, depending on how this sets up. One of my favorite sayings is, the future is hard. Whether it's in weather or marketing or whatever. And in many cases, it's really hard right now because there's a lot of uncertainty. So what I would like to do for you folks today is maybe eliminate some of that uncertainty in my own special way. And I got hooked up with Andy this last fall, talking to some folks. I work for the Agrilife family as well, and I'm trying to spread that message through the Western and the Southern High Plains in a meaningful way. So if there's something, and there's a question, or you ask yourself, well, I hated your presentation, or I really liked it, I'll post my contact information up there at the end of the show. If there's something I can do for you, would you please let me know? Because that's kind of my mission right now. Let's get started. These are precipitation anomalies for the last 90 days. All you really need to know about that is where it's brown and red, that's bad. Where it's green and blue, well, that's good. All right? Texas Panhandle, most of central northwest Oklahoma, southern Kansas has been a disaster. Basically, it is the Dust Bowl region. And you know what? Every now and again, you would just kind of expect the map to look like this. All right? We're no stranger to that. But if you widen the view a little bit, it changes. There have been a lot of haves and some have-nots in there. And the thing that we have not been able to do is shrink that have-not region in the Western High Plains very effectively for about the past 2 to 3 years. And before that, there were some good times, but recently, it's been a problem. Again, that's for the past 90 days. This is a computer model forecast through Thursday morning in terms of precipitation potential. Okay? Is somebody in western Oklahoma going to get 2 inches of rain? Yeah, I think so. Do I know who? No. Same thing up in western Kansas. But as my message to my clients have been all week, I work for folks from Lubbock to Topeka. And I said, look, if you're in Lubbock, you're on the southwest edge, you're probably going to get gypped out. But if you're in Topeka, hey, you're going to be in the same boat as the guys in Lubbock. Threading the needle right through the middle. This is one of the best maps I've seen in a really long time to help a lot of folks actually give a little bit of water. And yet I have people complaining to me this morning. It's not enough. Hey, I know it's not enough. You're running a 3-year deficit. And I don't want that fixed in a day because it will all run off. And you will be in the same position that you were before. So I'm like, just calm down. Be a little patient. Everything's going to be all right. We're working on this. That's a good-looking map right there. Let's walk back through history since we took care of the next 24 to 48 hours. This is something that I have been showing agricultural producers and really anybody in agriculture that tries to grow something in the dirt in the western and southern high plains, whether it's a wheat farmer, a corn farmer, or a grass farmer. This is a Pacific Decadal Oscillation since 1854. And for those of you that don't know what that is, simply put, it's when the Pacific Ocean is either warmer than average or cooler than average, not necessarily El Nino or La Nina, which I will get to in more detail in a second. But the red spikes are when it's warmer than average, the blue spikes are when it's cooler than average. You can do the math right there in the history. You can probably pick out some years that were rough. I'll bet you something that most of those years that were rough, we were in a blue spike. Let's narrow it since 1998. Back around 98, 99-ish, the Pacific flipped from a warm phase to a cool phase. So really, for about the past 25 years, we have been seeing a Pacific Ocean which is overall cooler than average. Historically speaking, when it is cooler than average, we struggle mightily, okay? I got a guy in Lubbock, cotton farmer, okay? And he says, man, ever since those windmills went up about 25 years ago, it hasn't rained around here. And I'm like, Brad, is it really the windmills or that thing right there? Perception's reality, okay? But this has been a problem for us. This is just since the last year. And we are still maintaining that negative value. So now that I've showed you that graphically within this, let's look at it in terms of the oceans here. Where you're seeing the blues, that's where the water is cooler than average. Where you're seeing the reds and the orange or yellows, that's where it's warmer than average. So over here on the left side, This is what I would love to refer to as the golden age of agriculture in the western and southern high plains. Really, I know we had a few tough years in the 80s, but really the 90s in my backyard in Colorado, you could blink your eye and get 2 inches of rain if you wanted it. Okay? Over here, this is the cool phase on the right. It's really just a flip-flop of each other. Okay? And it stands to good reason that if you flip-flop the oceans a little bit, you should actually see different weather, not only in the shorter term, but also in the longer term. I think it's good reasoning. Makes sense, common sense anyway, which isn't necessarily that common anymore, but you get the idea. This is where we are right now. So a couple of things I'll point out up here. First of all, the red arrow that's in the upper left there, that's warmer than average pool there in the North Pacific. We've got a cool pool off the west coast of North America. The oval shaded area, that's where you look for to see if we are in a La Nina, where that region is cooler than average, or an El Nino, if it's warmer than average. Well, we've just spent about 3 years in a La Nina where that area has been cool. We closed the door on that, and we are rapidly headed in the other direction. In fact, some of those water temperatures off the west coast of South America are almost 5 degrees Celsius above average. And you know what? The El Nino hasn't even gotten started yet. A lot of times when the atmosphere does one thing for a period of time, it will overcorrect very abruptly and move another. And I believe that's kind of what we're seeing right now. But it's not just about the El Nino or La Nina thing. Remember, we've got something that's decadal over a longer period of time that we've struggled with for a while. All right? So the La Nina being gone, great. That's step one. I would really love all of that blue off the west coast of North America to disappear. And it's not going to disappear overnight, but I'll show you some signs that I think that it will, at least, if nothing else, start to moderate a little bit. And that's a step in the right direction. It's given somebody an inch of rain when they really want 3. It's a step. The Atlantic has a similar thing. Since 1856, again, blue spikes are when the Atlantic is cool, red spikes when it's warm. The Atlantic fluctuates on a little longer time scale, all right? A little farther out there. So you can see that's why it doesn't change as much. And the reason I'm showing this to you is because one of the most important things in terms of a graphic that I have ever shown, really any type of farmers and ranchers, but I tried to really drive it home into the younger generation of ranchers, is that you better have a drought plan if you farm or ranch in the western high plains or the southern plains. If you don't, then you're not very smart, to put it bluntly. So, this is based on drought frequency. In the upper left, the golden age of agriculture. The blue means low drought frequency. Pacific in a positive phase or warm phase. Atlantic in a negative phase, a cold phase. We are in the lower right. And that's where we've been largely for about the past 25 years or so. So where the red is, that's where drought frequency is enhanced. So from a historic standpoint, we should be in a drier time because of the way the oceans are situated. All right? This isn't just voodoo BS. This is actual historics when you look at it. Okay? And in my backyard up here where my folks farm and ranch in eastern Colorado, I'm in drought about 75% of the time, so it really doesn't matter anyway. Okay? Oops. So, while they get that fixed, the message here is that if 25 years ago, okay, when I sat down in the living room with my family and I told them, we are fixing to switch the pattern. The problem here is you need to be prepared for that pattern switch. And you need to be thinking about what you need to do to prepare that. I usually tell my dad, like, you're going to have, 2 years of hay on hand? A couple years ago when hay was cheap, that's exactly what I told him. Because when hay isn't cheap, then you're trying to feed yourself out of a drought. Whoever made money in here trying to feed themselves out of a drought? I don't see a whole lot of hands. It's not tenable. It's not feasible. It's not good business practice. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do. But the problem with that is that spreading that kind of message really is where I got my footing, okay? Because it was something that people hadn't talked a lot about, this longer range forecasting thing, okay? So with that in mind, it was a message maybe that they never heard of and tried to grab onto it, And that's essentially why I'm here today with you. I'm trying to spread that message that in terms of long-range forecasting, we can do some things now. We've never had better long-range forecasting, okay? And I've heard it all. When the turtle's going uphill out of a ditch, that means it's going to rain. Saw a snake crossing the road. That's guaranteed 3.5 inches of rain this afternoon, okay? Cows are bunched up in the field. Rain, right? Well, flies are biting them. Oh, but the flies are mad because it's going to rain. I've heard them all, man. I've heard them all, okay? Let's walk back here just a couple of maps. My point is with this thing on the lower right, would that have been important to you 25 years ago? How would it have changed your business? I think it would have. That's my goal. When will that change? Well, the Atlantic has been in its phase right now since about 96, and the Pacific has been in its phase since about 98. So on the order of the Atlantic, 30 years we're working on? Should be getting ready to change for too long. Same thing with the Pacific. Is that important to a younger farmer or rancher that may be inheriting a legacy ranch or what have you? I think it should be, but that's just my humble opinion. My goal is to tell people and educate them when that phase may shift and what to be prepared for. I'm not the smartest man in the room, and I don't pretend to do it, but my niche is to try to take something that complicated, break it down into layman's terms to where it can be actionable and usable in an agricultural setting, or whoever is interested in weather. These are precipitation anomalies for the past 25 years, from January through December. It should be dry there because that's what it's been. All those yellows and oranges, that's where we've been in precipitation deficits for the past 25 years, okay? Makes sense. This is a sea surface temperature anomaly forecast, all right? So this is what it looks like in May. We've got the warmer than average stuff off the west coast of South America. We got the blue still off the west coast of North America, so we're pretty locked into what we are seeing right now, okay? If we go to the next, which is July, we're losing some of that blue off the west coast up there. The red is gaining quite a bit of steam, okay? And things are progressing, as they should. It's nature. If we go to the next map, you can see, what is this, September? Look at the reds or the oranges and stuff that's starting to move farther east up there in the North Pacific. Full-blown El Nino going on, and the Pacific as a whole is warming. As I said, that's what I want. I want to see that, right? Now, I've heard some folks say, we need a strong El Nino to fix this. No, we don't. You know what strong El Nino does? It does the same thing that strong La Nina does in reverse. So then you have the people that were getting rain that aren't getting rain. They have people that weren't getting rain instead of everybody getting things. If it's a less strong event, you have more weather variability. You have more pattern variability. You don't get locked into these ridiculous weather regimes that in some cases can cripple a region, like what we've been dealing with off and on here. But that being said, I really think that El Nino is going to be in our future, the way it's building, all right? For those of you that don't know, when you're looking at percent chances upwards of 80, 83% by the end of the year, those are really strong percentages at that range, all right? So confidence is pretty high. Will it be strong or not? That's yet to be determined. We have to see how things kind of unfold across the Pacific in the next couple of months before we can ascertain that. But I like where we're heading here, is my message. This is one of the computer model forecasts through May 28th. And I really hesitated to show this to you today because someone will say, you said it was going to rain, man. I know how you work, all right? I got it. But I have an alligator skin and a long memory, so we're okay. The cool thing about this is back in the fall, when we were looking at these types of things, people were like, it's going to rain, it's going to rain. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I think we're going to have a hard time for a while. But I said, come late April and May, I said, there are some signals that I really am liking to see this pattern change. And I've been staring at these stupid maps now for a while, and this one came out yesterday, and that is the absolute most rain signal I have seen in the western and southern plains in a very long time, okay? But you might say, well, Brian, it's a seasonal change. It rains every year during the seasonal change. Really? I live up there, and we don't see that same thing happen every single year. But you get the idea. But this takes you through May 28th. And those poor boys in Iowa, they're probably going to start crying because it hadn't rained in 3 days over there, okay? So that's what they do. This is another computer model. This takes us through June 4th. Pretty much the same signal, all right? And I know they got a corn crop to deal with back in the Corn Belt. Don't get me wrong, and there are implications that are wide and far-reaching for that. I'm not worried about that just yet. I'm focused here in our backyard. And again, I like the signal there from western Kansas, eastern Colorado, down into the Panhandle. East and southeast Texas has been showing a wet signal for quite some time. I still have a little bit of trepidation for West Texas, but those anomalies I can live with. A little bit of brown there. There's always a little bit of brown out there anyway. I've been in Lubbock 3 different times this year. There's a whole lot of brown down there right now. All right? But you get the message here. And the thing is that I don't necessarily want you to look at those numbers and take it to the bank. I want you to see the trend. And I want you to recognize that it's a favorable trend and how to shift things around a little bit. That's my goal. So let's look at this particular model. And you might be saying, it's like, what are all these acronyms and what they do? Okay, so a little bit of inside baseball here. The United States, when it comes to computer modeling for weather, not a good thing. They try to make cuts every year. Their research and development is not good. Not good. There will be days that I don't look at any computer models from a weather perspective that are generated by the U.S. I go to Europe. I go to Australia. Those people got it figured out over there. They know the value of weather information, especially in the long range, especially in those agricultural regions. They put the money into it. They put the R&D into it, and it makes a huge difference. So why I wanted to qualify that, this particular model is the main long-range model that we use here in the States, or seasonal model, if you will, okay? The NNME up there stands for North American Multi-Model Ensemble. It's a group of models, okay? It's not just one. And they average it out, and that's what they get in terms of a precipitation forecast. Green's good, red and brown, red bad, okay? But don't necessarily just look where the green is. In many cases, to me, it's more important where the brown is not, okay? So there's May's forecast. There's June's forecast. Lighten things up all the way from western South Dakota down the Front Range into Texas, points east. Corn Belt, there's still winter back there, so they got to get that figured out. July. Again, look where the brown isn't. One of the things that I have a little issue with is you see the red and the brown coming northward out of Mexico up there into southern New Mexico and Arizona. In this regime, if you will, for those of you that are familiar with the monsoon that develops in the southwest United States, this may be one of those years where that struggles a little bit, all right? I got a guy that I work for in southeast Arizona. He's got a big ranch down there, and he has to make a decision of whether to keep his cattle in East Texas or southeast Arizona. Well, last year, I told him to get all 6,000 head to southeast Arizona. Boy, am I glad I was right. Okay? He's going to make the same decision this year. And I told him, I'm like, Sam, you might want to put those cattle farther east this year, because that monsoon might be a little bit of a problem. You can see it here in August, same story, okay? But things, for the most part, where the drought has been the worst and where we've had the biggest problems, we're starting to turn the corner a little bit here, okay? Going to September, let's see what happens. It's a long ways out there. But there's nothing big, nasty, and regional about this getting its claws in us one more time here before we can actually maybe dig out a little bit before we flip it. And then we go into October. This is when I really think our friend El Nino will probably start to really kick in, okay, historically. Y'all remember what 2015 was like? I would say in the grand scheme of things, 2015 was probably the last really solid wet year across all of the western and southern high plains, where again, it's one of those years where you probably had more water than you wanted. And I know that sounds really stupid, but I know a lot of people that did. Let's look at the Euro model here. Here's May's forecast, okay? It's a little more bearish up there across parts of Kansas, eastern Colorado, but it's got some good signs here. I'm happy. If I'm in Colorado and it's raining in Texas, I'm happy. That means it's putting moisture in the ground. We'll get a southeast wind and blow all your nice moisture up our way, and we'll make clouds and we'll make rain. Okay? So I'm all right with that. If we go to June, things start to light up even more right there. Historically speaking, when there's an El Nino, the Midwest and the Corn Belt is usually wetter than average up there. It's a little different than the model I showed you a little bit ago. Same thing as we go into July. Look at the quote-unquote monsoon failure that's happening out there from southwest Colorado, eastern Arizona, western New Mexico. Again, the North American model had a hint of it. European model, it's kind of locking onto that, right? Gives me something to look at. If we go to August, same story. Monsoon continues to look like a problem out there farther west. Other areas we can probably live with here and there. And you might be asking yourself, well, what does that do to tropical storm, hurricanes, all that business? Well, typically an El Nino shuts off the Atlantic Ocean in terms of hurricanes and opens up the Pacific Ocean. Been a while since we've had hurricane moisture come up from the Baja of California and grace us with a 4 to 7 inch late summer and fall rain, hasn't it? Well, there's September. Might be onto something here. The history is working with the model. And when I see that signal, I get a little excited about that kind of stuff. You know, it actually starts to make sense. Or it could all be wrong and it doesn't matter anyway, right? I get paid whether it's right or wrong anyway, right? You guys know that. Okay? Here's one more. This model absolutely nailed last year. This is May, June, July. I don't see any browns, yellows, or anything across pretty much all of Texas up through the western high plains, even a little bit of green up there across Nebraska, western Kansas, eastern Colorado. And then if we forward this a little more, this is July, August, September. Kind of the same story. Last year at this time, had a lot of oranges and reds on that map where it didn't want it. Okay? So again, another trend that is a nice one. Historically speaking, let's talk about this about a little bit. When the PDO, that Pacific Decadal Oscillation thing, is negative or cold, from April through August, from 1948 to 2021, this has been where our precipitation anomalies have ended up. Where you see in the oranges and the reds, that's where historically it's supposed to be drier than average. Now this is just looking at just the PDO, not anything else here, all right? So what this map is telling you is that when the PDO is negative, this is what we should see historically, just looking at the PDO. We have other elements at play. When we look at ENSO is El Nino in the Southern Oscillation, okay? Flip the color scheme around. I don't know why they do that on that website, but they do. Yellows and reds is wetter than average, green and blue is drier. So when we have an El Nino brewing, everybody looks happy. Eastern Colorado, western Kansas, all the way south. We dry up in the northern plains a little bit across the Dakotas, which they could use it. And things are in good shape. That's April through June, from 1979 to 2021. Temperature anomalies. Well, if it's raining a lot, stands to reason we have more clouds around, ground's wetter, doesn't heat up as much, we should be cooler than average, right? Same story. Whenever we've had an El Nino, April through June, 79 to 21, it's been cooler than average in the center part of the country, and they dry out up northwest and get hot. June through August temperature anomalies when you have an El Nino. Look at that corn belt. Did you see that European model hammering that corn belt with rain up there? And then you look at the historics on it, you see that? Interesting. And then if we look at precipitation anomalies, June through August here, we're basically average, slightly above average, and the real wet stuff happens up Wyoming, the northwest high plains, eastern Colorado, western Kansas, okay? So that's kind of what it looks like in terms of the history with El Nino. So you might be saying, well, those are two contradicting things here. When the PDO is negative, it should be dry. El Nino, whatever. However, if we are moderating or if we're warming that Pacific Ocean, things start to turn. In summary, this El Nino development this year, it's not a certainty. The next 5 minutes aren't a certainty. So why would El Nino at the end of the year be a certainty? However, I think it's pretty likely based on the evidence that I see. But I've always cautioned folks, doesn't necessarily imply immediate relief for everyone because we still have a little bit of work to do with the PDO. Still negative. It should be continuing to become less negative in time, and I'm very hopeful, based on where we're headed and where we've been historically, that it will help facilitate some longer-term relief, and not just the hit-or-miss stuff or the short-range stuff. History suggests the worst of this particular cycle is behind us, and at the very least, short-term relief appears likely. That warming Pacific will greatly aid in this. You might be saying, well, what do you mean by cycle? Well, the past 3 years, because that's where we've been, all right? So and that's what I call a shorter-term cycle right there, what we've been doing. The land has some healing to do. We've been sending you folks a lot of dirt. You get a north wind come in about 60 miles an hour. We had pastures blowing all night 3-4 nights ago at my house, or my folks' house. Pastures blowing in the middle of the night, yeah. And we do great rotational grazing. We know what's going on, but boy, it's been tough. My optimism is cautious. I think there's better times ahead, hands down. If someone asks me a question, I do my best to answer them, okay? And I think there's a lot of things that people need to hear in that regard about that. Hedging your bets one way or another, great. I want to show you the forensics and the evidence so you can make your decision on your own. And I think that's important, instead of being on the fence post all the time, which I do not sit on the fence all the time. If there's something I can do for you or your outfit, I don't usually bring business cards to this because I usually find that people throw them away or they get lost in the pickup, or saw my dad do that, son, okay? Anyway, that's my email. That's my cell phone number. I'm usually up till 2 in the morning, so if you want to call me and chat, you can. If you're going to prank call me, don't do that, okay? At any rate, this is my goal. TV isn't for me very much longer, okay? They're going to figure out how really ugly I am here pretty soon, and they're going to kick me off the air. But there are also some things going on in that line of work that I'm really not a big fan of. So I'm looking to continue to carve out my business, which I've been doing for quite some time. And I love Texas, okay? I love the people. I love working with you folks. I love working with people in ag because we get things done. And bottom line, you're some good people. Questions? Fire away.
So the Atlantic is going to start cooling off too?
The Atlantic will eventually start doing the same thing, cooling down, okay? So the Pacific will eventually warm up, and the Atlantic will start to cool down. Rarely are they ever in complete phase where both of them are the same, okay? Now you might ask, when's that going to happen? I'd say, well, probably we're going to see some blinking going on here in the next 5 years or so. And you're like, well, you're really pinning yourself down with that one, you know. But that's the way these decadal cycles look, you know. You have to find that evidence and say, this isn't just a blip. We think it's a full-on phase shift, and then we can grab onto it and make those better forecasts. That's why I really think this type of stuff is important to younger farmers and ranchers, because they're the ones that are going to be going forward and utilizing this stuff and making it make sense and making it work for them.
One more question right over here. Yep, go ahead. You were first.
I'm just wondering, it just seems to me like, okay, I was raised at Clarendon. It's a whole lot drier than where I'm currently at in Oklahoma. Historically, that seems to be moving east. I mean, it seems like now my part of Oklahoma is getting just as dry as Clarendon.
You dry out that soil farther west, and your rainmaking ability is going to shift farther east. I am not a fan of dry soil for a variety of reasons, okay? Dry soil heats up faster. Dry soil that heats up faster makes the wind blow more. The wind blows more, it dries the soil out, which heats it up. It's this terrible positive feedback mechanism that goes in, and so it shoves that rainmaking, you know, farther east. East of 35 in many cases has been better. But if you go back through history and look at when that shifts backwards, that stuff goes all the way into central New Mexico, okay? So yeah, shift is on like that, has a lot to do with what the soil's doing, has a lot to do with what the Pacific Ocean is doing. Yep.
Very good. For the sake of time, we're going to stop questions right there. But Brian, you're going to be around here for a little bit. Is that
Be
right?
around a little bit.
Just
if you want to chat, if you have another question, my contact information.
Yeah,
was
can
up
we
there.
pull that slide back up with his contact information on there? And what I'm going to encourage everybody to do, take your phone out and take a picture. How often does the weatherman give you his phone number? You know, I'm serious, and his email address.
You don't have to encourage that.
Okay. But hey, you know, a great resource, and I just encourage, thank you for taking the time. Did you enjoy the weatherman today?
Thank you all.